It's this month's book special, and in it, I'm playing tour guide again. So, buckle up and welcome to Derry. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Dave Musson, at Dave Musson on Instagram, and this is the place where I talk to you about all things Stephen King. Now, in this particular video, we're on to this month's book special, and I'm going to be giving you, as thorough as possible I can, a guide to Derry, Maine, one of Stephen King's most infamous towns that he's created. So lots of stuff to get into. It's going to be very similar to my guide to Castle Rock that I did a while ago. So if you enjoyed that, then settle in, because we're going to be going all things Derry. But first, a couple of quick plugs. You might notice I'm wearing my Misery Run DMC mashup shirt. This is part of my own range of Stephen King themed band shirts, so you can find a link to in the description. You can also find my award-winning collection of short stories, Once More Around the Sun. And if you like what I'm doing on this channel, you can become a constant viewer. You can subscribe as a paid member of the channel, support me directly, and get extra special bonus content. If that sounds good, check the link in the description. And of course, you can just subscribe to this channel. That helps massively too. Thanks. Okay then, so this guide to Derry, like I said, is going to be very similar to the guide to Castle Rock that I did. Spoiler free as possible. I'm going to tell you about the town, take you around some of its more famous landmarks, and take you through the stories that are set there. So do let me know what you think of Derry. Are you a fan of this little hellhole? Would you like to go there on vacation? Are you completely insane? All of those kind of things. Get involved in the comments. But otherwise, yeah, get ready. Keep your wits about you. Stay close. We're going to go on a little tour of Derry, Maine. Just stay away from the sewers, okay? Okay, let's start with the town of Derry itself. Now, Derry, Maine is a town that I'm probably more afraid of than any other place I've read in fiction, because it is dark, it is bleak, it is unsettling, and if you need help, chances are you are not going to get it. So Derry is the setting for a number of Stephen King stories, most famously It, but we'll come on to that in a moment. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the town itself first. So Derry is always described in King's works as being near Bangor, but in fact, Derry is actually King's version of Bangor. He's gone on record of saying that. King lived in Bangor for a long time. He knows that town very well. He spent a lot of time looking into its old sewer system, all of those kind of things. And there are lots of parts of the real life Bangor that you can see in King's version, which is Derry. And interestingly, there's a map on Stephen King's website that places Derry in the vicinity of Etna, which is near a real town near Bangor. So it's all kind of in that sort of part of Maine. And of course, Derry sits in the larger Derry County, which is again something that King has created. Now, the thing to remember about Derry, even though it might have this nice mixture of interesting architecture, sort of like Victorian times, quite sort of a 50s feel at points as well, it's got green space like the Barrens, it's got iconic structures and buildings in it, it's got beautiful library, all of those kind of things. It's important to remember that Derry is not a nice place, and as I've already mentioned, you will not get help, particularly kids. The adults do not help kids in need there, and lots of dark stuff has happened there, as we're about to find out. So let's dig into the history of Derry. It is one messed up town, and before we get to the stories that are set there, I just want to take you through some notes of things we learned about Derry's history before we even get to the events of the stories that King tells us there. So here's a selection for you. 1741, the original settlers of Derry Township, about 340 people, disappeared. Derry was started as a beaver camp until one day 91 people vanished without a trace as well. That's the original people who signed the town charter. 1851, John Markson killed his entire family with poison and then gobbled an entire white nightshade mushroom himself. 1864, 120 people, so that's 50 kids and 70 adults, were shot, and only 10 kids survived and 1 adult. These were shot by a gang called Derry Padrinos, ran by Confederate sympathizers. In 1879, the remains were found of a crew of 9 lumberjack who were snowed in a camp at the upper Kundiskag. All 9 of them had been hacked to pieces. Then in 1906, on Easter Sunday, 102 people, 88 kids and 14 adults were killed during the Kitchener Ironworks explosion. In 1929, the Bradley Gang was executed by a group of vigilantes in a shootout downtown. And in 1930, the Black Spot, which was an officers' club for non-white army soldiers, army folk, the Black Spot burned down, killing a lot of people. So yeah, not exactly flowers and puppies when we look into the history of Derry, right? Okay, now we're taking a tour of Derry, so it's important to support the local businesses, right? Give them some of your tourist dollars. So I'm going to go through some businesses to look out for while we walk around the town that you might want to go and support. Do feel free to go in, just don't expect them to be too nice. But we have Back Pages, which is a used bookstore. We have the Centre Street Drugstore, the Dunning Butcher Shop, the Derry Townhouse, Derry Public Library, the Rite Aid Pharmacy. We've got a clinic for woman care. We've got Secondhand Rose, Secondhand Clothes. Got the Red Apple, the Falcon, and Acadia Mental Health. And as well as the business, there are lots of notable landmarks to look out for. So again, settle in and I'll tell you a bit more about those. So with these notable landmarks, again, lots to explore. As your tour guide, I won't be joining you directly because I know what this place is like. I will be staying safe in the van. But yeah, do go and explore them. And don't forget, of course, to look out for the massive plastic statue of Paul Bunyan, which is based on a real plastic statue of Paul Bunyan in Bangor, Maine. So first of all, there's the house at 29 Newbolt Street. So this is a rundown house that has a bit of a sordid history. Definitely don't stay there too long. In the Troubles in 1985, with all of the murders that were going on, 2 bodies were found at this house. One just across the street and one under the porch with no legs. Lovely. So the Barrens is a bit of green space near the town centre, covered in woodland and vegetation with some water, a river going through it. And it's kind of the space where our friends in the Losers Club used as their playground in the school holidays. They would build dams and have all sorts of adventures there. And it's kind of where they all met for the first time as well. It's a lovely bit of green space. So maybe check that one out. Just, again, be careful. There is also a canal that flows through Derry. There's previously been Canal Days festivals, although some of those have been tainted because of, murders that have happened there. You can also check out the Derry Civic Centre. So this is a relatively new building. The original one was destroyed in the big storm of 1985, but the new one was designed by world-renowned architect and former Derry resident Ben Hanscom. And it plays an important role in a story set in Derry called Insomnia. Now, something you won't be able to see, unfortunately, but you might see pictures of, is the Derry Standpipe. So this is a huge tower that was full of water and that used to be open to Derry residents for them to come in and climb to the top and look at the view and just enjoy the facilities, basically. But unfortunately, again, in the big storm of 1985, it got destroyed and washed away. And there's also a legendary local company called Tracker Brothers Shipping. Now, this was a company who had trucks and did lots of logistics work. And they also very handily kept a baseball field out the back of their depot for local children to play on. So it was one of those parts of town that you would often see kids going to play baseball and maybe peering through the windows to see what they could see inside the Tracker Brothers building. But again, unfortunately, that big storm in 85 destroyed it. Okay then, we can finally get onto the stories that Derry features in. Now, the first time Stephen King mentioned Derry was actually in an extract of something called The Bird and the Album, which, if like me, when I was researching this, you're thinking, I haven't heard of that. Don't worry, it all makes sense. So this is actually an extract from it when it was still a work in progress. So this was something given to a fantasy reader, the 7th World Fantasy Convention, which was an anthology given to people who attended that particular convention and was limited to 1,000 copies. This was in 1981, if memory serves me correctly from my research. And this is an extract from it. And it's the scene from it where Mike Hanlon has to confront an interesting version of Stan Uris in the library. But fear not, if you're scrabbling around to try and read this, this basically just becomes chapter 14 of it. So you can read it if you've got that particular book. So 1986's novel It is the first full story set in Derry and the one that most people think of when it comes to when did we see Derry first. But there were mentions of Derry before that. Interestingly, the first mention of Derry is actually in a Bachman book in The Running Man from 1982. There's also mentions of Derry in The Body from 1982, Pet Sematary from 1983, and in the Skeleton Crew stories Uncle Otto's Truck and Mrs. Todd's Shortcut, which in Skeleton Crew from 1985. Then after it, Derry gets a pretty big mention in the Tommyknockers. We know that Derry is the place that a lot of the male residents of Haven, which is the town in Tommyknockers, they head up to Derry for their drinking and their whoring, which is lovely. And we also get mentions of Derry in 1987's Misery, in The Night Flyer, which is a story collected in 1993's Nightmares and Dreamscapes. There's mentions of Derry in 1991's Needful Things, in 1992's Gerald's Game, in the 1999 collection, Hearts in Atlantis, and in the story Autopsy Room 4, which is in 2002's Everything's Eventual. Oh, and it gets a mention in Storm of the Century. However, in amongst all of that, we go back to Derry for a proper story. We go back to Derry for Insomnia, 1994, where we get a whole story in Derry, and, well, the town isn't any less weird. We also spend some time in Derry in 1998's Bag of Bones as well, and we meet some of the same characters from Insomnia in there as well, so that's an interesting one for you to look at. And then Derry plays a key part in Dreamcatcher from 2001. It's the place where our new core four of friends in Dreamcatcher grew up and met each other, and plays an important role in the story as well. So we see new friends and we get a little update on some old friends as well. As well as that, the 2010 story Fair Extension, which is in Full Dark No Stars, that one is set in Derry. And then there's a healthy chunk of 11/22/63 from 2011, also set in Derry in 1958 no less. So very shortly after the events of the first half of It. You following? Yes, it's all very exciting and scary to be back in Derry at that point. But if you want the full Derry experience, and if you want a really good insight into what Derry is really like, the 11/22/63 section's terrific. After that, we also get mentions of Derry in the final Dark Tower book in 2004, in 2006's Lisi's story, in the short story Mute, in Under the Dome in 2009 there's a mention. It gets a nod in the You Like It Darker collection from 2024, and there's a decent chunk of Gwendy's final task from 2022 also takes place in Derry. So, like I say, lots of opportunities to visit this lovely little town. And if that wasn't enough, we also see Derry on screen a few times as well. So Derry is, of course, captured in the It miniseries in 1990 and in both It Chapter 1 and It Chapter 2 from 2017 and 2019, those two theatrical releases. And, well, you get a really good sense of how warped that town is in all of those adaptations. Well worth checking out if you particularly want that bleak visual. We also see glimpses of Derry in the Dreamcatcher movie from 2003, and in the 2019 Pet Sematary there is a road sign saying that Derry is 20 miles away. There's also a mention of Derry in the series Haven, but we don't go there. Okay, so to wrap up your guide to Derry then, did you know that Derry appears in works not by Stephen King? I know, right? Let me pull up my notes for you. So, in Tabitha King's novel from 1993, One on One, there's a reference to Derry, and in the afterword, she thanks another novelist who was kind enough to allow me to use the town's name. How sweet. Keeping it in the family, in the 2010 novel Horns, Joe Hill, who is King's oldest son, he writes of the real city, Derry, New Hampshire, which is interesting. But not only that, in his 2013 novel Nosferatu, he includes the fictional Derry that we're talking about on his map and list of supernatural places. So that's a nice little bit of fun. And then, outside of the King family, in the crime drama Criminal Minds, the 10th season episode Mr. Scratch cites Derry as the location of a murder induced by hallucination, and the victim of the murder was named Tabitha, after King's wife. Lastly, in the 2020 film Run, that refers to Derry as an example of a location to look up where the protagonist contacts 411, which I don't entirely understand, but I took that from the internet. So there we go. Make of that what you will. There's your guide to Derry, folks. Do you still want to visit? Let me know. Okay then, your guide to Derry done. What did you think of that? What's your favourite Derry story? What do you make of this town? Would you visit if it were a real place? Have you ever been to Bangor, Maine? Does that have a Derry vibe to it? All of those things. let me know. And while you're doing all that, check the links in the description to find my collection of short stories, Once More Around the Sun, my range of Stephen King themed band shirts, including this Misery, Run DMC mashup, and hit that link to become a constant viewer, become a member of this channel and support directly. Of course, if you can't do that, that's fine, but maybe consider subscribing, and if you're already subscribed, maybe share this video with a friend who might enjoy it. That would be great. Cool, okay, there's this month's book special. We're done with Derry. We can leave. Is everybody on the bus? Good. What, somebody went to the sewers? Oh, okay. That's too bad. We're leaving. Bye.